know your thoughts on this movie, the universe, because there's a lot of them and a lot of varying degrees of opinions. I think it's the beauty of this franchise is everybody has least favorites, biggest fears and scares put onto screen, the underrated ones, the overrated ones. Let me know. And again, if you do not already, please consider following both my Letterboxd and my TikTok. Letterboxd for me to upload my written form reviews more often than not before I hit the record button. It's a great, streamlined, and organized avenue for you to see my more expansive thoughts. And my TikTok, I upload every day short form videos. I experiment, I have fun, you get to learn a little bit more about me, and it's awesome. So please go ahead and check those out. But my friends, without that in the way, and we're just full steaming ahead, you may ask yourself 4 times in, what is the Warrens dealing with now? Well, this film is set in 1986, decades after Ed and Lorraine Warren leapt into the news because of their paranormal investigative abilities, whether it is Lorraine's psychic ability to speak with the demonic, with the spiritual, or Ed just looking good as ever. I love you, Patrick Wilson. You follow them as they're later in life, but the Smurl family is developing a far more demonic relationship with people in the house they are living in, needing the attention of the Warrens despite them saying they wouldn't be doing it anymore. And their daughter Judy plays such a crucial role in this fight for life, death, good, and evil. The Conjuring films, specifically the Conjuring films, are pretty paramount and fundamental for me being who I even am today, as much as I unabashedly love horror. If it wasn't for my parents taking me, like I can remember it yesterday, we went to this restaurant, ordered a platter of food, and I remember originally we were going to see The Wolverine, and I wanted to see it. I was freshly 10, and I love superhero movies, but there was something about, whether I saw an advert or something, The Conjuring, that was scratching my brain. And my parents, they kind of deliberated about like whether I should see this movie. Probably shouldn't have, but I'd seen some stuff up until that point. Went to Blockbuster like every week and got like 5 movies, and little by little, one of them to 2 of them were horror and thrillers, and it sort of started sculpting my view on horror in general, my affinity for it. I became obsessed with that feeling of unease and fear because it only lasted the moment the movie started and ended. I had that like receptor in my brain that knew none of it was real, and that fed me, it nourished me. And like yesterday, I remember standing or sitting in the car with my parents, both in the front seat, holding like an iPod, showing me the trailer one more time of The Conjuring, and they're like, hey, if you don't want to see it, that's okay. You don't have to, we can go see The Wolverine. And the music, the loud music in the trailer, I was terrified, but we did it. And I remember sitting in an auditorium, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but as a kid, things felt so much more grand, and it was like I was sitting in a coliseum. Opening night, the theater, you could hear a pin drop, and what followed was a film that shook me to my absolute fundamental. I've never forgotten about it, and to even another extent, watching The Conjuring 2 at like, I forgot if it came out in like 2015 or 16, so I must have been 12, 13, no matter what. That film terrified me in very different ways. I was still so young. And as I've gotten older, like my family has stopped watching horror as much as they did. They definitely feel, especially for religious horror, that is just inviting things in. I don't really believe that whatsoever, as it's like, I love horror because I know that it is people, craftsmanship, and workers trying to scare you. And if it works, it's great. I don't believe in the whole sort of spiritual aspect of inviting things in for the sake of watching 2 hours of entertainment. I never have. But needless to say, from 2015 to now, that franchise has ballooned. And while I have seen the abysmal Annabelle, the solid Annabelle creation, I never saw the third. Never bothered with the Nun films, La Llorona, nothing, because I think they just looked cheap and ineffective. And although I will never shortchange the fun and often perhaps the power of jump scares, I think those films take a far more streamlined and silly, simple approach that are going to guarantee you to jump, or they just look boring. And it's especially interesting that from 2015 to now, my taste has changed. And so I recently got to watch all the Conjuring films in theaters leading up to the last Rites. And I got to see the third one, and I will most definitely be waiting to sort of expound upon my overall thoughts briefly with all 3 of those films, because I want to rank them. But I had a very unique experience. And the other thing I want to say is I watched these movies, and these might come as controversial, but considering Ed and Lorraine Warren's actual life and how a lot of people have sort of put indictments against their worth, credibility, and legitimacy, it makes it very difficult for me to go into these movies and say, man, I'm watching a true story. And I go into them, all that being said, as works of fiction. Real people who I do think were big pioneers for the art, the idea of paranormal investigation. But I don't buy that these are real, considering that so many individuals who have been a part of these real cases have come out and said they're hoaxes. And it wasn't because that they were true stories once upon a time in my head that made them scary. So I feel like that's kind of fundamental for me to let you know as a gateway into my thoughts on this new one. And this new one is not directed by James Wan, but the first 2 were. And then the director of La Llorona stepped in to do The Devil Made Me Do It. Then he did The Nun 2, Michael Chavez, or Chaves, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, I think it's Chaves. And then he does The Conjuring Last Rites. And a lot of people do not like The Devil Made Me Do It. I do. That's all I will say. And so going into this, it felt like a very unique opportunity, as The Conjuring 1 to The Conjuring 2 are vastly different movies in such unique ways that I don't really like saying like, oh, the first one is so much better than the second and vice versa, because they're entirely different mechanisms, entirely different ways of approaching horror, entirely different ways of James Wan really opening himself up as a filmmaker. The second Conjuring feels a lot more indicative of the Aquaman, the malignant side of James Wan. And in a way, The Conjuring 3 and The Conjuring 4 being directed by a filmmaker who is far more early in his career compared to when James Wan directed the first and the second Conjuring. But it is very, very different. Very, very different. And the first massive pro I will give the film is each of the Conjuring films up until this point have given me a very different meal, a very different kind of horror. And I know for some people will be like, not really, it's paranormal investigation, demonic, apparitional, but I think like the first is far more contained. It feels like it happens to any family, and this family just so happened to be at the wrong place at the right time. And the Warrens feel far more built off of their career. The second is a much more emotionally driven one. The third is like much of like a Law and Order episode, if you will. Like they're actually investigating instead of kind of exercising the demons. And this one, which I think it so bravely and smartly does, is almost put the paranormal aspect to things secondarily. And I think that will stir a lot of people's feathers. It is the longest film at 136 26 minutes, clocking just, I believe, a minute more than the second, which held that title. But I think the franchise works. And the reason why Annabelle really doesn't, or the reason why The Nun or La Llorona just falls flat, they don't have Patrick and Vera. Even beyond the rose-tinted glasses of me growing up with them, they're incredible performers. They're cemented in iconography off of their chemistry, off of their vulnerability, and because they've never hammed it, they've never phoned it in, they've never done it for a check. Each and every time, as each of the 4 films are laid out a few years after the one before it, I feel that growth from the onset chemistry of the movie before translates. They love each other. It is a relationship that is so built off of faith, but faith in the realm that they are marrying and confiding their life with someone that is quite literally being brought down to the hellish landscape that these demons want them to suffer in, on top of the real world. And that is an insurmountable feat to translate onto the screen. How do you convey chemistry where these people are living through experiences no one else does, and having moments that their faith, their life, their being is questioned? I think you can convey that fear, but how do you translate that into the reinforcement of the love they have? And for me, I think they do it in spades. This is Patrick and Vera at the best in the franchise. It's the age they're at, the wear that all of these exorcisms have had, but most importantly, the Smurls and what they're going through being directly linked to Ed and Lorraine from the earliest stages of them being the investigators that they are. And especially, which I found really funny, is, when I saw the first one, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, my friend brought up how sad the ending is. And when you look at the idea of what the Warrens do and how they do it, there is this concept that they are not able to have a big family through the call to action that their profession necessitates. And they provide these big families with a moment of bliss through what they can give as a form of what they aren't able to have. And because of that, the first film sort of kind of tackles that a bit more, and the second does as well. But the third doesn't really do so. And so I think the fourth rightfully makes that the entire crux of the story is, we spent our lives doing this. Let's take a step back, worry about our daughter, worry about our life. And then it just so happens that the paranormal kind of just keeps dragging them. And I loved it. The actress who plays the daughter, Judy, this time around too, she conveys it all. A little bit of that frustration of partial abandonment, understanding why they did what they did, but feeling like she was potentially even robbed of a childhood with her parents. Or even the way that she is having this inkling of a sense akin to her mom, and the way that the Warrens kind of deal with how do you kind of live, how do you go about retirement, if you will, when the job you had was fighting and thwarting demons. And Michael Chaves, I think, elevates all of the things that I wasn't really too fond of with his direction in the third. I think he has a fine-tuned grasp at really lighting a scene, especially when it comes to the more fear-based, paranormal, even maybe dreamlike stuff. I think he would do a great job with like a Nightmare on Elm Street remake. That's just my thought. But when it came to the dialogue, it felt very flat, very uninspired. And this time, he really does focus on like wides and one-shot zooms, and that worked really well. Everything is so crisp and in your face, so many close-ups. And for a film that spends half of its 2 hour and 15 plus minute runtime letting these characters just exist, which was something I think the sequel started to kind of lose, where it was all about the forward momentum. Having them be mainly close-ups in dialogue or long takes where you just see the actors breathe and mesh, whether it's the Smurl family or the Warrens, is beautiful, is brilliant. And then it leads in to the horror. Now, a big complaint that I have heard said about the third especially is it doesn't really have many scares. Now, with this movie being basically like 25 minutes longer than that third one, I may say that it's either the same amount of scares or a little less scary. Yet, and I get it, by saying that I think a lot of people are immediately turned off. I don't blame you. When the franchise is sort of promising scares, and this being like one of the flagship titles for horror, it's like Hereditary for elevated newer horror, but The Conjuring really did change so much in sort of the midst of the found footage craze. Like, this shook everything. It made almost $400 million, both films. So, my point being, when I say that, hey, this fourth film is the longest, but potentially has the least amount of scares, I know a lot of people will be turned off from it. I think personally, it contains a couple of the franchise's best. That opening, the way that it immediately folds you in, and it immediately makes the emotion at top notch, while also conveying that, like, the Warrens, this is a case that is not about, like, their guns for hire sort of thing. Like, hey, there's something going down in frickin' Ohio. Why don't you take a look? But it sets itself immediately stating, proudly so, what the Warrens are going to be dealing with in this film ties directly back to their beginning, and the way that it even involves the daughter, I thought was exceptional. There is a scene involving VCR home video footage that I think that actually may be the best scare that I've gotten out of all four films. Again, I think they work so well, having seen all four of them, because they all go about scaring you in different ways. There's different jump scares, different rogue gallery horror, the Crooked Man, Valak, all of these people. I'm not trying to spoil, like, in this one, but, like, this one, I think, mainly has the paranormal side be so founded upon the families, the Smurls and the Warrens, and I can get why people would be frustrated at the fact that the real exercising doesn't happen until much, much later, maybe even an hour and a half into the movie. It spends a lot of time just letting the Warrens exist. I want more of that from the first three. I love the moments where they're engaging with the family, and you're seeing the Warrens develop through how their profession kind of makes a family in a state of heightened fear be close. But I'm like, okay, that's brilliant. I love it. Maybe what if we had that just be about the Warrens? No family, just the Warrens. And the movie is the answer to that. Keeping up, though, with the horror, there is a couple moments where 4 films in, second film from Michael Shavs, I don't think this movie is lazy. I've been hearing that complaint here and there, that it feels like it's cashing things in. It's doing it for a check. The safety net of the Conjuring franchise is bound to remake the money and then some. I disagree entirely. There is, like, one scare that I think is actually pretty terrible. The CGI looks bad. It just is like, really, that's where we're going? Like, it felt like kind of a horror movie that's, like, rated PG-13. And it's like, let's make a creepy face, because I know the teenagers are gonna love it. Didn't really work for me. But I will say the horror really does feel elevated from 3 and sits proudly atop 1 and 2, where a lot of it is longer takes, is really well lit, is drawn promise that Lorraine has can bring the creatures that they fight, the situations they find themselves in. The third movie is probably the biggest testament of that. But again, I'm saying this all like, if you think this movie is silly, if you think this movie is extreme, it isn't like they're pulling the rug from out under you 3 films in with this 4th. It's a journey, it's a through line. It is a franchise that builds, operates, and flourishes off of the bigger pieces of Ed and Lorraine that we get. And you can argue or make the claim that how can someone watch these and love the actors who are playing characters that have been proven to not be the best scummy grifters? I get that. I view these as pure works of fiction, and I see Patrick and Vera acting out characters or people who kind of played friends. And again, like, it's pretty irrefutable when you have the characters of these families that have gone through such atrocities come out and say, didn't happen, for me not to see it and be like, oh, that's not real. It doesn't take away from me whatsoever. I still really have a great time with these, despite this one being a bit more bloated. Does not really need the 2-hour and 15-minute runtime, despite me 100% acknowledging a victory lap isn't bad. Getting to celebrate after spending 10 plus years giving it your all. And I do think Michael Chaves does give it his all. James Wan bends over backwards and he commits. One of the greatest modern horror filmmakers. I hope he comes back. I hope the DC machine didn't completely take him away. And with that, I think it works. It works for me, despite the runtime, despite a really bad jump scare. And I could admit that I do wish there was a bit more leniency into the paranormal. Maybe even a little bit more explanation and exploration of the Smurl family. But yet again, I say that, and I think if we called the alternative, which was more scares and more Smurl family, it would have felt like a retread. And I think this movie proudly sits doing its own thing for better and sometimes for worse. But it's also the first Conjuring movie that made me actually genuinely cry. And it wasn't even like the end. It was like pretty early on. And to say that a Conjuring film, let alone the 4th Conjuring film 10 plus years after the franchise began, is a testament. Patrick and Vera, I miss them. They're like family. The way that everything, especially in this movie, through their age and their chemistry has formed, the looks that they give. When Ed sees Lorraine having a moment where she's in a heightened state of interpersonal demon psychosis, it's like, man, this guy cares more than ever about Lorraine. Or when Lorraine sees Ed dealing with aging and health issues, she wants nothing but for him to be safe. But most importantly, it's when both of their attentions are put towards a daughter who is coming into her own, who is finding love. And there's moments that I'm like, dude, this is great. There's a great conversation that Ed has with Judy's boyfriend in sort of their cabinet of trinkets and knickknacks. And I thought it was brilliant. And I think the movie from the rip, the best opening of the franchise, sets the stage for an intimate story that ends in such a satisfying and conclusive manner. I cried. I loved it. Despite my flaws, despite the bloat, despite the gluttony, I think there are times when films, especially in franchises as good as these, deserve the gluttony. John Wick 4, you want to talk about a 4th film that's over 160 minutes. Do the action scenes need to be as long as they are? No, but they deserve it, they've earned it, and they look damn good. That's pretty much everything I can say about this. The Exorcism takes a backseat in favor of Warren family chemistry goodness that I loved. It has a couple scares that are franchise best. The performances across the board are terrific. The ending is so satisfying that it makes the whole journey worthwhile. It's great. It's so good. And I think it's also like, I love these films. I don't go into these expecting them to be the best horror films of the year. I go for Ed and Lorraine, and I got it in spades, twice a meal than I got with the other three. With all that being said, it isn't anything spectacular. It's comfort soul food. It's a comfort soul food buffet, actually. And it's a franchise capper that I'm so happy that I got to grow up with, you know? The scares are good. Some of the scares are brilliant. The score is really good. It's shot in such a fun way. It feels like an improvement so much over the third. And it does feel right between the first two Conjurings. Now where? We'll talk in a second. But with all that being said, I'm giving The Conjuring Last Rites a B+. Yeah, we ballers do a B+. My friends, there is no form of criticism without ranking and positing art against art. I'm being facetious. I just love to rank films that I love. I find it not very fun when some of them are bad, because I kind of have to talk about how bad they are, and it just feels a waste of my oxygen. So, as you can see, I don't for some reason own the second one. That's for no reason. I think it's great. I have 1, 3, I just talked about 4, and 2 is great. So, where do these films stack? I'm glad you asked. Well, coming in from best to worst, or worst to best, sorry, I don't like to do, I want to keep the suspense going. At number 4 is The Devil Made Me Do It, a movie that in the moment, watching it in theaters on re-release for the first time, I was hooting and hollering, because it so quickly says, the exorcism stuff, let's do it in the beginning. Let's follow trying to prove not the innocence, but the fact that paranormal entities existed in someone that is being convicted of a murder. And thus, you have Ed and Lorraine going place to place, globe-trotting in the 100-mile radius in their car, trying to investigate what happened to this family, to this man, and not all of it works. It is by far the most caution to the wind, stupid out of the 4. The moment you try to ask any logical question about the logistics of this case, it crumbles. But when you suspend your belief, you let loose, this movie lets loose with you. The concept alone of the horror being rooted in something a bit more physical than demonic, I thought was great. The two kind of characters that represent the horror in this film, the antagonist and the conduit of the antagonist, if you will, I thought was terrific. It was pure mustache twirling silliness. I get why people hate it. It isn't as scary. Michael Joffs doesn't really have a grasp yet as to how to do horror and scares. But man, when it's Ed and Lorraine going from place to place, and it turns into something like it's Scooby-Doo, it's great stuff. There's a bit where Lorraine is piecing together the moment-to-moment happenings of someone whose body's gone missing. It's terrific stuff. Despite me saying Michael Joffs doesn't really get how to shoot back and forth A to B conversations, his heart is in the right place. There is an incredible amount of sauce that people say is severely missing with James Wan's absence. You're so trippin'. The last 20 minutes are kind of insane as well. But it is messy. It is so stupid and breaks the formula to a point where I can commend it. But I do know that if I rewatch the movie, it won't be as good. So it'll be my 4th. Coming in at 3rd, we do have The Conjuring Last Rites. But hey, I gave it a B+ off the jump. I spent almost maybe 30 minutes talking about it, so you get my thoughts. At first, when I was watching it from the opening to then the following 30-ish minutes, I was full stop ready to say it's top 2. But I do think as the runtime sort of does at moments sort of trudge along, and it doesn't make me bored at all, but it does make me think, man, I don't think we need to be 136 minutes long. I do start to unwind myself a little bit. The last 20 does really ramp things up. Does it go as intense in that last 20 to 30 as I wish it did? No. But it does such a good job at establishing the intimate stakes and what's at risk and stake from the moment it starts. I loved it. I cried. It was a terrific send-off. Maybe one day it'll be top 2. But for now, I'm going to keep it as is. And maybe to the surprise of many, at my number 2 is The Conjuring 1. For years, I came out of both of these films saying the second did lapse around the first. And the way that I rewatched these films is actually, I saw the first again in theaters, then I saw the second in theaters, then I saw the first again in theaters, then I saw the third. When I saw it the first time, I was like, dude, this is greatness. That last half, where the mom becomes to get possessed, and she is losing herself to the demon, and she escapes, and that bit, it was at the time the most chills and almost filled with tears I got, where it's from the moment on where the guy says, I found April, she's underneath the kitchen, her head, and goes to chase her. That bit is all that it's about. It's amazing. The exorcising of the demon out, the mom recollecting the family, the memory. It is why I love The Conjuring so much so that I wanted that emotional intensity or vulnerability to be translated into the Warrens that we get with Last Rites. It's great stuff. I think it changed the genre entirely. I think it really is James Wan in an era that we won't get like that again, and I'm okay with that, where he does a much more subdued approach. The handheld is wonderful. It leans you in at every single moment. It maximizes the emotion. The daughters are wonderful. Annabelle, as always, great stuff. I love it. But it doesn't necessarily scare me quite as much as The Conjuring 2. But it's not actually the horror that makes this number 1. And I don't agree with the sentiment I had where this movie runs laps around the first. They're so different, so varying in their approach and their ways to elicit fear, that it's like, why would you go against each film for the sake of the other? They're Jekyll and Hyde, their craziness, the parts, but they come back. This is James Wan unbridled. I would say Malignant is probably him at his most untamed. But the way this movie looks, the way this movie flows, it is close, borderline neck to neck with the first. Today, I just think it's number 1. I love it. And funny enough, although I think the first is technically like the scariest between the two, why this movie works for me is the angle it takes, where in the only case that the Warrens get in these 4 films, they almost don't buy into. It questions the legitimacy of this family, of this demon, and how it hides. And they don't get anything for a while. The way that this case is publicized and used for theatrics and what people think is for money, when in reality they're just trying to get the word out. It communicates that level of desperation that the first one does, but in a different way between the family that this demon's holding on to. It introduces the nun, the crooked man. It feels like, I said earlier, a rogues gallery of creatures that James Wan implements. And I love it. It's close. All of them have their strengths, a bit of their weaknesses. I think the style in this film tapers just a smidge, a hairline of the scares. But there's moments like that one shot of Ed trying to talk to the demon as she has her mouth full, and it's like a 4-minute long one take. James Wan is the best to ever do it in every cookie jar he's put his hand into. But yeah, so that's my ranking. It goes 3, 4, 1, 2. But honestly, 1 and 2 are irreversible. 3 is pretty confidently at the bottom, despite me really liking the swings. Swings a bit too crazy and wackadoo though. 4 I'm gonna rewatch it eventually, and if it hits a little bit more, it could be close as well. But yeah, my friends, that's my ranking and my thoughts on The Conjuring. I'm so excited. I have a couple videos planned. I did say earlier, I've been thinking about coming back to the foray and the fold of role plays. I have a green screen that I haven't used. I'm a bit more in tune with my editing software and my approach, and I want to be more consistent. Not overwork myself, obviously, or go beyond my bandwidth, but I have missed it. I think there is a level of comfort that you just don't really get in any other kind of video. Like, this is me talking to you about the medium I love most. But I think there's an artistry that is woven when I'm not me, but I'm role-playing in attributes trying to make you feel as comfortable as possible. It's like I'm escaping and you're escaping and we're meeting in the middle, you know? Stay tuned for that, my friends. But let me know, above all, what you thought of this film, the franchise. I didn't really want to rank the other ones because I can almost bet money that they would have been under all of these films, even below 3. So yeah, my friends, I love you all, each and every one of you, so very much. And above all, remember, my friends, to take life one frame at a time.